Good morning, new community. Good to be with you. 2,000 years ago, a carpenter turned rabbi appeared from almost nowhere and gave what's been widely acknowledged as the greatest teaching about how to live the world has ever known, the Sermon on the Mount. And for its time and place in history, it was so revolutionary, so countercultural and so religion busting. But sadly, despite the world having this teaching for 2 millennia, is just as revolutionary, countercultural and religion busting today as it was then. This morning we come to the end of our 10 weeks of revisiting this teaching of Jesus that I guess we could sum up as how to live the Jesus way. We've come to the finale, the summing up, the final thoughts that Jesus wanted his hearers to go away with and reflect on. Almost every subject Jesus has tackled has been pretty challenging. But in these concluding thoughts, Jesus goes further and faces his listeners with the most important decision of their life. But he also gives 2 keys that will enable us to live out this message, to live this way of Jesus. One key is to enable us to be the people Jesus has been inspiring us to be. And the other key to enable us to practically live this Jesus way. So that's 3 good reasons for us to delve into this final passage today and hear what Jesus wants to say to you and me personally. And along the way, I'm going to suggest 3 challenges to help us truly engage with this life-changing Sermon on the Mount. But to understand the context of Jesus summing up, we need to briefly recap what has gone before. And as the world's greatest teacher, Jesus gave us a master class in communicating. Right at the start of his teaching, he did 2 really important things. First, he grabbed their attention. He launched straight into a series of seemingly outrageous, sensational, even provocative statements. Blessed are the poor in spirit. Really? Blessed are those who mourn. Blessed are the meek. Yeah, right. Blessed are you when you are persecuted because of me. You can't be serious. He certainly got their attention. But the second thing he did was to give a compelling reason why they should listen to him, to listen intently and intentionally. He said, you can be blessed. We all want that, don't we? The blessed life. And this was not just another rabbi doling out vague, religious-sounding sound bites. He details the blessings they can have. And they are pretty impressive. You can be blessed by having the kingdom of heaven, by inheriting the earth. You can be filled with righteousness. You can see God. You can be called a son of God. You can have rewards in heaven. These opening statements are gloriously full of the why factor and guarantee the disciples and crowd stay glued to his every word. And notice he started with who they could be in the 8 Beatitudes before we talked about what they should do to live this Jesus way. Of course, what we do of any worth always comes out of who we are. And then he led on to the what. Keep your prayers simple and short. Forgive others readily. Store up treasure in heaven. Don't accumulate wealth down here. Don't be judgmental, etc., etc. Do your good work secretly. Don't plaster them over TikTok or Instagram or, if you're old, Facebook. And so to the ending of Jesus' talk, and we're into Matthew 7. And again, it's a masterclass in communicating. He gives us more of the why. Why listen? And he calls them to make the ultimate life decision and gives these 2 keys to how to be and do the Jesus way. In talking about the ultimate life decision, Jesus urges them to make the right choice. And he follows that with a warning and finally a strong encouragement. So we're going to start in Matthew 7, 13 and 14 with the choice. Enter through the narrow gate, for wide is the gate and broad is the way that leads to destruction, and many enter through it. But small is the gate and narrow the way that leads to life, and only a few seem to find it. There are only two ways of living, and you have to choose the narrow way, the Jesus way, or the broad way, which is any other way. The atheist way, the agnostic's way, the anarchist way, the New Age way, the self-help yoga tree-hugging way, or the very popular Frank Sinatra anthem's My Way. But Jesus makes it crystal clear that there are two destinations. The narrow way, the Jesus way, leads to life. Jesus would later describe this as abundant life and eternal life, the best life now and the best life forever. Jesus, in fact, gave himself the title of the Way. And interestingly, the early followers of Jesus were called the people of the way, that narrow way leading to life. But then there's the broad way, the way of refusing God's way, making our own decisions, making ourselves God. It's the way of the world. And Jesus starkly declares this is a journey to destruction, both in this life and the next. It's a choice that God graciously allows us to make. But Jesus urges us to enter through the narrow gate. He never spoke to gain popularity. He spoke that increasingly rare commodity, the truth. He spoke to offer true life to those who wanted it, the poor in spirit who knew they needed it, those who hungered and thirsted for something more than the hollow wisdom of what the world can offer. And this morning, if you've not made that choice to enter the narrow way, to walk in the way of life, the blessed life with Jesus, knowing that you'll be with him right on into eternity, I want to encourage you to make that choice this morning. This is how Jesus put it in a later conversation. For God so loved the world that he gave his only Son, that whoever believes in him shall not perish, but have eternal life. And hundreds of us listening this morning are so glad we've made that choice. And if it would help, we'd love to talk to you about this most important of life's decisions. Just email us at hello@newcommunity.org.uk and we will gladly connect with you. But then Jesus moves on to a warning. Matthew 7 verse 15. Watch out for the false prophets. They come in sheep's clothing, but inwardly they are ferocious wolves. And verse 21. Not everyone who says, Lord, Lord, will enter the kingdom of heaven, but only he who does the will of my Father, who is in heaven. Many will say to me on that day, Lord, Lord, did we not prophesy in your name, and in your name drive out demons, and in your name perform many miracles? Then I would tell them plainly, I never knew you. Away from me, you evildoers. There were people in Jesus' day going around making public prophetic words, apparently casting out demons, claiming to heal the sick. But they'd never entered the narrow way, the Jesus way. People can appear to be on that way, even think they're on the narrow way, do things that you would expect from the narrow way. But in who they are and the fruit they produce, they show themselves still to be people of the broad way, their way. And Jesus said, by their fruit you will know them. You know, he went on to say a bad tree cannot produce good fruit. With these guys, the outside looked great, doing the visible religious stuff and posting on Instabrag and Boastbook about their latest revelations and how they were helping the needy. They were people on the broad way, doing it their way. They'd never entered Jesus' way, the narrow way. It was all hypocrisy, and boy, does Jesus hate hypocrites. And he gives this warning that there will come a time when it's too late to leave the broad way, and he will say to them, away from me, you evildoers. But Jesus mentions two key things here that will encourage those of us who are not casting out demons or raising the dead on a weekly basis, but are wanting our lives to produce good fruit. Firstly, he's saying, those who know me will enter the kingdom of heaven. Remember, blessed are the poor in spirit who know their need of him and humbly take his offer to go through the narrow gate and walk with him. because theirs is the kingdom of heaven. We know him personally. Secondly, those who do the will of my Father will enter the kingdom of heaven. Well, what is the will of the Father? Well, I think Jesus had been telling them in this Sermon on the Mount, be merciful, give to the needy, but keep quiet about it. Quickly forgive those who offend you. Pray for those who are against you. Pray, but keep it simple. We may not be ready to give great prophecies or perform many miracles, but this seems sort of achievable for most of us, doesn't it? It's simply producing good fruit by being a good tree. And I guess when we become fully established in this foundational way of being and doing, Jesus may then trust us with the more public and dramatic ways of serving him. And lastly, chapter 7, verse 24, Jesus gives a picture of two people building a house, basically their lives. The wise person chooses to build his house on the rock. And when the storms come and beat on the house, it stands firm because its foundations are on the rock. But the foolish person built his house on the beach. And of course, when the storms come, his house is dramatically destroyed. Many people will be very familiar with this story. But sadly, it's often just relegated to Sunday school. I was brought up on this song, The Wise Man Built His House Upon the Rock. And then we gleefully sang, and the house on the sand went crash. Little did we understand the severity of what Jesus was saying here. But here's the encouragement. In verse 24, Jesus makes this statement that really only the Son of God could make. Therefore, everyone who hears these words of mine and puts them into practice is like a wise man who built his house upon the rock. You know, for anyone else to say that would be outrageously egotistical, but if Jesus is the Son of God, then to say this was eminently reasonable and true. One of my best friends from Fareham, great Christian guy, good family, senior management job, developed such severe pain in his back that he had to go into hospital despite the great COVID risks to have major surgery on his back, not once but twice. And so sadly now he's paralysed from the waist down. He's been in hospital for months, had a heart attack, still has lung problems, needs most things doing for him. He's been desperately low, as you can imagine, but he has my huge admiration that he's kept his faith through this most vicious of storms. While in hospital, he led his son to faith over WhatsApp. He's been sharing his faith with the nurses, eager to talk about faith. He had built his foundation on the rock, on Jesus Christ, and when the storms came, he could still stand firm. You know, I would definitely say Jesus is my rock. But in thinking about this passage and observing the huge storms friends of mine are going through, I realise there's still quite a bit of sand around in my foundations. How firm would I be if major storms hit my life? If my not very large pension pot was taken away? If my health went belly up? Or my nearest and dearest were no longer there? My guess, and I'm not a prophet, is that the world is going to continue on its current path of accelerating change and uncertainty environmentally, financially, and politically. And it's also my guess that it is likely that being a Christian in the UK will get more difficult. And so I'm sensing Jesus' encouragement to us this morning to take this opportunity to resurvey our foundations and see how we can build more firmly on him, the rock. Let's be those wise people who hear these words of mine and put them into practice. Putting these teachers into practice takes intentionality and effort on our part. This is Jesus' foundational course for his disciples. And our danger is that we can subconsciously think, yeah, I've read that passage many times, heard a number of life-changing sermons on it. Yep, been there, done it, got the t-shirt. But actually, we never graduate from this course. We just keep going deeper. Putting Jesus' message here into practice is a lifetime endeavour. So just to help us go deeper in living this Jesus way, here's our first challenge. Read Matthew chapters 5, 6 and 7 again and make your list of bullet points, summary phrases that remind you of each issue Jesus talked about. I came up with 32. You may have more or less, but make this list and put it in your Bible and read it through on a regular basis. But actually, Jesus' conclusion to this great sermon doesn't start with the narrow way. It actually started in verse 7. Jesus very cleverly boils down how to live his way to just two keys, two incredibly simple keys to growing in living the way of Jesus. And here's the first key in verse 7. Ask, and it will be given to you. Seek, and you will find. Knock, and the door will be open to you. Jesus knew that the people in front of him would be struggling on many of the points he'd made. There would be those who knew they can't even manage to pray anything like regularly. And Jesus is saying, if you want to grow in prayer but are struggling, just ask. Asking is recognizing our poverty of spirit. When we do that, we are setting ourselves up for blessing. And if we're serious about asking, then we will actively seek the answer. And if we're seeking, we will humbly make our way to the door of the one who's inviting us to live this way and knock. And we will receive that heart for prayer that we sincerely want. You know, there are a couple of areas covered in the Sermon on the Mount that I've found God talking to me about and felt a desire to go deeper. You know, in our relationship, in our marriage, Di is much more the readily generous one. I'm the more cautiously generous one, I hope. And I've been praying about it, and very weirdly, I've developed a real excitement about giving. God has been working in me, and I may just lost a little bit of reward in heaven by telling you that. And just to say, begging letters will not be answered. But if we're serious about going deeper in any of these issues that Jesus raised, then Jesus encourages us to ask, seek, and knock, and we will receive. He will give us those good gifts. So our second challenge is to prayerfully read through the list of key points that you made from the Sermon on the Mount and see which one grabs you as the area you most want to grow in right now. And ask and seek and knock and put Jesus to the test. One thing that's helped me in being inspired is by Jesus' own example of living this way. We can look at Jesus weeping over Jerusalem, mourning for that great city, and be reminded that blessed are those who mourn. And, you know, I've got plenty of way to go in reaching Jesus' level of mourning, but we can ask for a bigger heart to mourn over the homelessness, the addiction, the abuse in our city. And as hardened Roman soldiers drove nails into Jesus, he didn't judge them. He understood they were just doing what they were told and they had no idea who Jesus was. And he prayed there and then for his enemies. And we can ask and seek and knock for a greater heart for those around us who we struggle with for various reasons. But the second key follows straight on in Matthew 7:12, and it's just as blindingly simple as the first key. Jesus simply says, so in everything, do to others what you would have them do for you. For this sums up the law and the prophets. So, therefore, in the light of all of this, in every situation, in all that you do, remember this one thing. Do to the person in front of you what you would want done for you if you were in their situation. The well-known saying before Jesus came along was, don't do something to someone else you don't want them to do to you. But for people of the narrow way, Jesus calls us to go so much further. Love always wants to move in a positive direction. So think about what situation the person is in front of you. What would you want in that situation? If you'd mucked up, done something wrong, you really regretted, you would want forgiveness. So forgive the person who has wronged you. Or be the peacemaker in that sort of situation. Don't leave it to someone else. If you were struggling financially, you would really appreciate others helping you out. So help out those in need. Don't leave it to someone else. If you are hurt, depressed, feeling sad, you would want others to support and encourage you. So do that for those who are struggling. Don't leave it for someone else. This is the great outworking of that command to love your neighbour as yourself. So here is our third challenge. Spend a day practicing focusing on the person in front of you, the supermarket cashier, the neighbour, the person on the phone or Zoom, a colleague at work, a plumber, the person on your mind who you have an issue with, the street beggar. And think, if roles were reversed and I was them in their situation, what would I want someone to do for me? And do that thing. And so we come to the end of this series on the Sermon on the Mount, and maybe start a fresh chapter of being and living this way of Jesus. So don't forget those 3 challenges. Make the list of key points from this talk by Jesus. Find the 1 or 2 things that you want to grow in right now, and be intentional about asking, seeking, knocking. And let's go out each day and more radically love the person in front of us, whoever that might be. God bless you.